Welcome to Stay Humble podcast, Rob Zand. Firstly, I want to do is a free word check-in to see how you are feeling today.
Yeah, I'm spot on, mate.
Any words? Any particular words? No? That's great. All right, so just give us a bit of a brief introduction about yourself, Rob, and what you do for the listeners, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an online fitness coach. So I've got an online business. Had that for a good few years now. I also coach in person as well at Proactive Fitness. Obviously, you've already had Jay and Alex on, the two owners from there, and I know they were quite interesting conversations to say the least. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell. Essentially, my role is to help people look better, feel better, have more confidence, whilst being able to enjoy their life, essentially.
That's great that you offer that sort of service. Certainly the nutrition plans and sort of the online coaching, you're able to reach a lot more people with that sort of aspects of your job. And what I wanted to just talk about is obviously the latest thing that news is to break at the moment is regarding obese people or people over 50 and now been threatened with a lockdown by the government, which broke in the last couple of days. I mean, funny enough, if that was to class on based on BMI, then technically I would fit into that category because I fit over the 25+% bracket, and I don't know how many other people would fit into that bracket. And I don't know what your views are on this. I wanted to sort of delve into this firstly.
Yeah, so in terms of, I think this is an interesting one, in terms of twofold. The first point that you mentioned there is it'll be based on BMI. Now, BMI doesn't actually take into consideration your body composition. So someone, according to BMI, might be overweight, but it's a case of, do they carry more muscle mass or do they have more body fat? So BMI is flawed. I think one of the biggest reasons BMI was brought in initially was because it could be used just on a very generic basis. And as I say, it doesn't take into consideration your body composition at all.
Yeah.
However, with that being said, obviously with them saying over 50s or people that are, could be classed as obese that are over 50 potentially being put into lockdown. For me, if anything, I think whether we agree with that or not, I think that really should open people's eyes as to the severity of the position they find themselves in. If they are obese in terms of they are carrying more body fat than they should be, or they should be for their height essentially, and that is more body fat than they should have, that is out of a healthy range essentially. So if people hadn't had a wake-up call already in terms of during lockdown, where they were probably sat at home, and they've either gone one or two ways. They've either got fitter and done something about it, or they've gone the other way. They've got fatter, they've eaten and drank more, they've felt sorry for themselves, they've perhaps told themselves a bit of a story that, well, I can't go to the gym now anyway, and just bullshit themselves a little bit. I think whether we agree with that decision or not, in terms of the government and if they're going to implement that, it really should be a wake-up call for a lot of people that they need to do something, they need to make a change. Now, the way I look at it is sometimes it's not always people's fault that they are in a position that they are. Sometimes people have been overweight since childhood and they've never managed to break that cycle and get out of it. And I know something we're going to discuss later is like education and different ways that people can perhaps crack this issue and get to a healthy body composition. But also it's their responsibility to do something about it as well. No, people aren't going to do it for you. But yeah, like it's an interesting move. I'm not sure I really agree with that, but based on, I think, what we know with regards to COVID is that some of the more the vulnerable categories, if you like, are people that are overweight. There does seem to be, I believe, some link between people that are significantly overweight and, you're more likely to really suffer like detriment to COVID should you catch it. So for me, Like, I think we just need to look at it in a different perspective. And if you are one of those people that is potentially going to be told that you have to, isolate because of this, then that should really be a wake-up call to you and think, right, what can I actually do to be healthier, to, and all the other things that go alongside it. Feel more confident, my clothes fit better, you've got more energy. And again, it's not easy, but it's, there's plenty of people out there in the fitness industry that can really help.
Yeah, definitely if they source that out. But like one of the things that obviously I spoke to you was that I've just finished reading The Energy Plan by James Collins, who's a sports nutritionist. And one of the stats that showed up from that was that 77% of men and 63% of women in the UK alone are overweight. So that's a huge bracket of people they're between the ages of 40 and 60, which are probably that sort of bracket age group where they're looking. I mean, yourself, you're working with most of them sort of people in that age bracket, are proactive yourself. So it's quite surprising that that's going to be potentially, put into a lockdown themselves. I don't know how that's going to affect them personally, certainly their mental health as well and stuff like that. It's going to be very challenging this period if that happens, of course. But
that's it. And I think, excuse me, and I think we've already seen numerous issues with regards to how the government have perhaps dealt with this pandemic since it sort of came into play in March. Excuse me. And the reason I say that is, obviously, we've seen pubs reopen before gyms have. We've seen, there's other things that we're going to discuss, sort of later in this podcast. But I think that was a big one, seeing where governments sort of heads were at in terms of they thought it was more important, perhaps from an economic standpoint, to reopen pubs and try and get businesses moving again. But then gyms didn't open for another 2, 3, 4 weeks after that. And I think it's a case of, all right, I understand it in terms of if people are exerting themselves and all that sort of stuff, but you can't say that people at pubs that have had a few drinks aren't gonna not move within a metre of each other and all that sort of stuff. And I think the biggest thing as well is the mental health aspect. If people have just been sat at home for 3 or 4 months and they've not been able to, or they've not exercised, they've not trained, they've not taken advantage of Zoom sessions that, for example, we at Proactive put on, then their mental health is going to be massively affected. And I think if we almost end up taking a backward step where certain people within this vulnerable category are told that they have to stay at home, I think that's going to have a massive detriment to their mental health and their overall well-being. Obviously, alongside their physical health, because they're not going to be able to be out, they're not going to be able to be active. Obviously, it's summertime at the minute; they're going to miss out on, a lot of sunlight and vitamin D and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I think the government really have to have a smart plan in place if they are to implement this, and there's got to be a real justification for it as well, I feel, because I think otherwise there's going to be quite a severe backlash. And I'm not sure, to be honest, how many people are truly going to stick to that either.
I don't know how either that they're going to make sure like these people fall into that bracket. How are they going to dictate that by, are they going to, like you say, everyone could be throwing a BMI calculator, or are they going to round everyone up and weigh them? I don't understand like the logistics in that sense. And I think that following that, then I've obviously delved into what the government's initiative or new initiative was, which is this Better Health, which is now going to be slightly with a partnership with Slimming World and Weight Watchers subscription. So they're not going to, what I've delved into is that they're not going to pay the entire amount. They are discounting the price for people to potentially use. And they're obviously sharing a 12-week NHS plan in terms of getting people to lose weight and offer that sort of service. But like I've said to you, do you not think if there's a better way of offering sort of like an implement, like I said to you, in terms of fitness trackers or something to encourage people to lose the weight? I mean, years ago, I can recall something in Russia in terms of to get on a train, they had to do something like 20 squats or something to get free transport somewhere. I mean, I'm not saying that's the way forward, but that's just an initiative that they got people to activate free transport, for instance, there.
I'll be honest, I've never heard of that. That's an interesting one.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, first of all, I have absolutely no idea how they're going to be able to qualify people to fit into that category, to be honest. Because if you're saying you're in that obese category because your BMI is above what it typically should be, because it doesn't take into consideration how much muscle mass you hold versus how much body fat you hold. Yeah, I've no idea how they're gonna do that. And in terms of like what you've mentioned with regards to the government's initiatives with regards to Slimming World and Weight Watchers, I think, and they're going to put some money towards that. I appreciate they are in a difficult position. I wouldn't want to be doing what they're doing, to be honest.
No.
However, with that being said, I feel like it's a really lazy move. I don't feel like they've looked into it at all. I don't feel like there's any passion there really to make a significant difference. I think they've just gone and looked at what's easy. Well, we know millions of people do Slimming World. We know millions of people do Weight Watchers. Yes, some people will lose weight, but there's also a reason that people go back to Weight Watchers and go back to Slimming World multiple times. Is because it's not a particularly sustainable approach. It doesn't teach you anything. It doesn't educate you particularly well. In fact, if anything, it sort of causes some of the issues that people have with regards to relationships with food and what they're told is good and bad and what they can and can't eat. And even such as things like scale weight and stuff like that, which is just really, really bizarre. You know, people getting weighed in the middle of an afternoon every other Wednesday or something, and if they've not lost any weight, then they can't have a treat or something like this. It sounds a little bit bizarre to me, but yeah, I think there'd be much better options for the government to look at rather than, quite frankly, these lazy approaches. And I think effectively, if already we're saying a third to a quarter of the country is already obese, then if that's not a big enough wake-up call to say, actually, we need to do something significant here in terms of educating people as to how and why we've got in this position and what people need to actually be focusing on to make a significant difference, i.e., yes, staying active, walking 10,000 steps a day. One thing that's been great in since sort of lockdown is seeing like families out on their bikes and all this sort of stuff, which we probably never would have seen. But in terms of the nutrition side of things, educating people about, you know, your calorie intake and how to reduce that, because whether you track your calories or not, they still count, you know, and not everyone has to track calories to lose weight and to feel healthy and to really benefit their life in terms of like looking better, feeling better, and as a result having more confidence in their clothes fitting better and everything. But the government need to do a much better job in terms of putting some form of educational program together, whether that's from the schools up or whether that's, I think now we're gonna end up with a generation where people are dying 10, 15, 20 years earlier than they should do because of the adverse health effects that obesity causes. So they need to probably plough billions of pounds into some form of educational process or system where people actually understand that, no, it's not the fact that you had a couple of sugars in your tea is the reason you're obese or whatever. It's due to the fact that for a consistent period of time, you are eating and drinking way more than you should, and you're not being as active. And as a result, this is the position you're in. So how they want to tackle that, that's up to them. I've sort of got some ideas of my own, but I think they just need to do a much better and more thorough job than they are doing now. And I just think it's it's probably an attempt at a quick fix. And as I say, it's just a lazy option and lacking a lot of real passion and thought, in my opinion.
Yeah, I've looking from obviously researching it recently. It looks like they've previously done partnerships with Slimming World in the past. So it's probably like you say, it's just a quick fix for the time and just trying to get through that. Do you find the digital age is having an effect as well? Like obviously, I've talked before to someone about like the human race and how hundreds of years ago, like cavemen, all that sort of stuff, they had to hunt for their food. Now we're in a digital age now where you can just pick your phone up and just click on blooming Uber Eats or any of these sort of delivery services and just get food literally within 10-15 minutes without even doing anything nowadays. And I think that's created that sort of, I don't know how to describe the right word for that, but just the way that people are just not, I think sedentary might be just something like that, really, is the sort of way people are now with food and stuff, instead of actually like, this was a good opportunity to educate people to actually prepare their own food and learn to cook and do the right thing.
100% agree. And it's funny you say that in terms of back to almost like caveman times, but actually I've seen some research that I could probably dig out for you where I think it was between like 50, 60 years ago, on average, we consumed, and it's probably more than this now because I've probably seen this research 5, 6, 7 years ago. We consumed on average 500 calories less per day across the board. Yeah. Now, if you add that up over a week, that's a fair amount. Now, if you also take into consideration that we had much more active lives, but also active and manual jobs than we have now.
Yeah.
So if you think that through nutrition alone, we were eating, let's say 500-600 calories less on average than we are now. Mm-hmm. It's probably more than that. Yeah. But also the fact that we were working manual jobs and everything now is automated. If you look at a lot of people, their routine is they get up in the morning, they drive to work, they sit at work all day, they drive home, they sit at home in the evening, they repeat that 5 days a week. While in terms of the food side of things, you literally, you do not have to move anywhere to have food delivered to your door. You can lay on the sofa, click on Uber Eats, you can pay over your phone. All you have to do is walk to your door, collect the food when it's delivered and walk back. Now, don't get me wrong. We do live in a world now where everything is a million miles an hour. People don't seem to have time. But I think we have more time than we realise in terms of the decisions that we make, how we spend our time when we're not at work, etc. And I think it is actually fairly simple to make smarter decisions with regards to our food. And for example, all the money people are spending on takeaways, if you really don't want to cook, like pay for a meal prep delivery service. Yeah. So that there is, and I actually wrote about this yesterday, there are always options and always solutions to having a lack of time. Now, for example, I'm not a parent, so I cannot empathise with how busy and stressed some people are that have kids and do work, every single hour and feel like they don't get enough sleep. There are a handful of people who legitimately do not have a spare second to themselves. However, I coach a few people like that, and we've managed to find solutions to their problems in terms of having a lack of time, whether it is meal prep delivery services, whether it is ideas that literally take them 3 to 5 minutes to do. They get a shopping list together. They can pick healthier options in terms of, every supermarket that you go to now has high protein, lower calorie, tasty, ready meals, if you like. I think if you said ready meal to someone 10, 15 years ago, they'd be like, no. They're a load of shit. Now they're completely different, because luckily the fitness industry has started to filter into the mainstream somewhat in terms of all these meals, and you see protein bars everywhere and all this sort of thing. So I think there are always options and there are always solutions. But again, I think it comes down to education for people, whether that's through coaches, whether that's through the government filtering it down. But again, perhaps the sort of government need to speak to some individuals that can give them some better ideas rather than just pushing people back onto Slimming World or Weight Watchers or whatever.
I think it's interesting to say, like, you particularly have mentioned a lot about education. Like, I work in a school background, so for myself, I do think in the main schools they should be encouraging food courses. Certainly, even from prime, like at the school I work in, we do food tech with kids, and they do all of, we show them how to make food and prepare food and stuff like that, and probably could even educate them a bit more in terms of what they're actually eating. But I think in terms of primary and secondary, like I can recall my secondary experience of food tech being maybe making an apple crumble and something else. And it's like, that's not enough to sort of educate me in terms of my life skills. School's only up to 18. After that, I've got maybe another 70 years where I could actually do with that education in terms of what am I eating and what can I do to make myself better and live a better life, I think they're sort of the things where if the government want to really make a big difference, that would have been one of the protocols, is to go to sort of the education settings first and then filter down hopefully into the parents and stuff like that.
That's it. I think it's twofold. I completely agree with what you're saying there. I think there probably has to be a massive overhaul in terms of what schools are educating in terms of nutrition, because like even when I was at school all those years ago, being 29 now, having done food technology, I remember like even just some of this, reading up some of the stuff in terms of what it would tell you about nutrition and what was important and what wasn't. And you look back and you go, well, obviously now I know that that's not scientifically correct. So I think it's a case of school education in terms of with regards to food needs a massive overhaul in terms of like what people should be focusing on eating. And it's not a case of saying you can't eat X, Y, and Z, but it's a case of, for example, let's say 30, 40, 50 years ago, sweets, a dessert, chocolate or whatever was a treat, or it was something that you didn't have every single day. Whereas now you see kids walk into school, eating, filling their face with whatever, drinking Monsters, or drinking,
high sugar drink, yeah,
Cokes and all this sort of stuff. And it's like you're 10 years old. Should you really be, drinking out of a 2 litre bottle of Coke on the way to school? It's probably not going to put you in the best position to learn. So I just think, I mean, that's a bit of a tangent, but I just think the school education with regards to nutrition in particular needs a massive overhaul. But then also, I think it's all well and good educating kids, but I think when they go home to their parents as well, if the parents aren't on the same wavelength or don't have the same level of education, then I think to a degree it can fall flat on its face, because it's all well and good being taught this at school, but if you go home and your parents aren't implementing the same sort of things that you've been learning, or if they don't have that same level of education, then I think there's going to be some form of breakdown there. Obviously, don't get me wrong, like what kids eat at school makes a massive difference, and I'm sure there's probably a separate conversation with regards to how that affects how they perform at school and their energy levels and behaviour and all this sort of stuff. But yeah, I think it needs to be twofold. It needs to be from schools upwards, from like probably primary school and into secondary school all the way up, but also, as I say, with regards to like the current generations, if you like, and people around 40, 50, 60 that are overweight and aren't active and have sedentary lifestyles and do eat a lot of shit and drink too much, they're going to find, unfortunately, that they are putting themselves in a real risky position where they are going to die earlier than they should, 10, 15, 20 years earlier than they should, because of their adverse health effects that have all come through lifestyle. I think a lot of the issues that people have now medically wouldn't actually occur, or they would be much less likely to occur if they were healthier individuals in terms of how much body fat they carried. They were more active. They exercised 3 times a week. They did plenty of walking, got some fresh air, and they'd just be in a healthier place mentally as well, I would suggest.
Yeah, I would agree with that totally. Like, I just think it is an education thing in terms of just being able to do that. I think there was like one thing that I was just thinking in my mind about then when you was going on about educating for kids, when you're saying about kids, what they were eating maybe in the day. It was just thinking in my mind, like, I remember Marcus Rashford obviously coming up with that scheme about in the summer. And at the time I was thinking, in my head, I was more thinking of the logistics in school, thinking what an absolute nightmare for the school people to do, fund all that, but or sort the vouchers out. But then in my head, I thought, actually, I realised like that one hot meal a day is what they might get. And I didn't realise how detrimental that is to kids not being able to, to imagine having 7 weeks at summer where you might not even get a hot meal was quite a sad thought process for them. And I didn't realise how much it matters to them to have that every day.
It's you know, Dave, it's scary that, and I think fair play to Marcus Rashford, and I think he needs to be like lauded for what he's done and the work he's done in terms of with regards to kids and getting school meals, because, and I think the biggest thing for him and the reason for that was he relied on those growing up.
Yeah.
All right, now he's a multi-million-pound earning footballer at Man United, but growing up, I think he had, I think it was just his mum. Obviously, he's got brothers and sisters. They really, I think she worked something like 3 jobs or something when I was reading about it. And without that scheme, as you say, they wouldn't have got at least that one hot, relatively decent meal per day.
Yeah.
And if kids are going 2 months without that, think of the detriment that that's going to have to their physical health. And, if you're growing up from primary school all the way through to secondary school and you're going at least, 2 months of the year, every single year without that, that's a long period of time. And in fact, if you didn't have that at school as well, then, there's no wonder that people are in such a poor position health-wise.
Yeah.
But as you said, it sort of did make me, it made me realise like how lucky I've been growing up. The fact that I almost took that for granted. You don't realise until someone brings that to your attention.
Yeah.
And I think, like some things are logistically going to be a pain, but like at the end of the day, there's generations of people that are going to go without and are going to end up in an even worse position than people are now if something doesn't change, if something doesn't drastically change. And is it going to be uncomfortable for the government? Is it going to be a pain in the ass? Is it going to be a bit of a ball ache and require billions of pounds? Yeah, it is. But ultimately, like, if you don't have your health, everything else doesn't really matter because, you're not going to be here for very long.
That's certainly true. I'm going to go a little bit off tangent a little bit with this, just because it's something that came up again in the book. And it's just in terms, I think we've discussed this probably before, I'd say around January time was certainly, maybe this was more apparent, particularly due to Netflix. But one of the things that I've read was in terms of increasing protein foods for the aging population, because they suffer, as you get older, you suffer, was it sarcopenia or something? I can't say it properly.
Yes, so it's effectively as you age, it's muscle loss as you age, and that's something that, especially if you're not doing any form of like resistant training or resistant activity, it's something that can sort of come on quite quickly. And I think for each year you age, it can sort of effectively get worse and worse. But I'll let you make your point.
So basically, what the point was is that people obviously lose muscle loss of up to 0.8% a year. And then people are recommended at that age now to eat particularly 1.2 kilos of protein a day. Now, what I wanted to say was the fact that protein foods seem to get a bad rap now in terms of people because of programs like Game Changer and stuff like that, where they seem like that real meat, you can't eat that. And yet that's the sort of things they're suggesting in terms of, if we don't eat these sort of foods, then you're going to lose muscle loss. And then that could lead to the sort of things of bones being weaker and stuff like that. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on, sort of what protein should we be eating really, in terms of putting them I don't know, I was just thinking.
I know exactly what you're asking. I know exactly what you're asking. So this is the issue with conflicting information. We see a lot of it, and unfortunately, you come across programs on Netflix such as Game Changers, which I think I watched about 5 minutes of the first time before actually watching it, just so I could speak about it really, so I had a good understanding of what it was about. And unfortunately, it's a program that lacks any real science whatsoever. Admittedly, some people will have watched it and gone, right, now I'm going vegan, this all makes a lot of sense, whereas in reality, it's just bullshit. Like, there's a lot of very heavily manipulated and cherry-picked, I wouldn't even call it pieces of science, to be honest. Basically, they've fitted bits and pieces to fit someone's agenda, which is ultimately what it is. Now, again, that's probably a whole different conversation. But I think if someone, before I go onto the main point that you're asking, I think if someone wants to be vegan, or someone doesn't want to eat meat because they don't enjoy it, or for ethical reasons rather, then that's up to them. That's fine. Yeah. And I don't think anyone can argue with that at all. Everyone has their right to make decisions that they want and that best suit them. And I think that's perfectly acceptable. Yeah. What isn't acceptable, in my opinion, is people sharing misinformation and miseducating people, if that's even a word. Like, basically just lying to people, saying this is bad for you, we should just follow a plant-based diet, etc. But in terms of the elderly population, I think if you look at any sort of high protein foods such as chicken, beef, fish, like your yogurts, your eggs, etc., are all fantastic choices. The elderly population, luckily still having two sets of grandparents, they've eaten for the last 80, 90 years anyway. I don't think you should look to change that. Now, I think in terms of preventing or helping to slow down muscle loss as you age, funnily enough, alongside eating adequate protein in your diet and resistance training, make a massive impact on slowing that down and effectively potentially helping you live longer. Like, there is research that backs that up and suggests that resistance training and being stronger, essentially helps you to live longer for one of those, for that reason, essentially. So yeah, I think people need to, and again, it all comes down to education, but through what people read through the media and now social media and on Netflix and stuff like that, it goes through phases. There's one period where everyone followed like a low fat approach. Fat was bad. Fat is what makes you fat, all this sort of stuff. Then it went the other way and it was like, actually, no, carbs are the reason that people are in a bad position. Everyone needs to eat low carb. Then it sort of went one further and it was like, actually, sugar's the main issue. And now people are trying to hit on protein. It's like, well, if all these things are issues, what have we actually got left to eat? Whereas in reality, like, you need a certain amount of protein, which is individual dependent. You need a certain amount of fat for multiple reasons in terms of like hormone production and just health in general. Carbohydrates also are actually important. Yeah. They're a main source of energy. They help with physical performance. They're also actually really tasty, and I don't know many people that don't like carbs. This is why, we probably could have spoke about the keto diet, and this is why I don't think the keto diet is a particularly good choice for people, because simply from a social aspect as well, if you go out for a meal, or you and your friends go somewhere and they're all getting sandwiches, you know, it's just not really going to work for you. So yeah, I think for the elderly population and for all populations, mate, to be honest, I think resistant training, if you can train 2-3 times a week, it's going to have a massive impact on your health,
Yeah.
and then obviously your nutrition, and just having adequate protein alongside that is going to make a massive difference.
No, it's really great that you've gone into that detail in terms of that, because it was just something that certainly surprised me, obviously with the statistics of that, and then obviously with what, like I said, the media, I think it's bias in it. It's just bias in terms of how they put it across, and it's just like, it was all biased towards in terms of do this diet, you know, just get away with meat and stuff like that. It was just completely biased. There's nothing like, there's no pros and cons. It was just pro, and it was one of the things that I certainly knew that frustrated yourself and certainly frustrated me from watching that sort of thing. Right, what I want to delve into now, again, is just going back into another government thing, is obviously the eating out for less, which is on a Monday and a Wednesday during August. Again, another thing that obviously bothered me was the fact that it's, yeah, great, it's 50% off in terms of food, but what does this encourage people to do? Is probably going to be that they're going to buy more food and eat more food. So basically, it's just going to be a negative. Again, like you said, obviously what we've talked about in terms of consuming more food and stuff like that. I mean, what is your thoughts on eating out for less? Because
again, I'll be honest, I'm not entirely sure on what the government's main aim was with this. Whether it was, because I know they discussed at one point, obviously, if you've had 3 or 4 months of lockdown where restaurants, pubs, etc., cafes have been closed and missed out on a lot of business, you know, economically that's going to really hit people hard, and it's going to hit our overall economy very hard. So I understand that they want people to get out spending their money in this country, put money back into local businesses, etc. However, if we're looking at it from a health perspective, I'm not entirely sure on what the main reasoning was behind it in terms of giving people that 50% off to go and eat out. Now, don't get me wrong, like there are potentially some benefits to this. People that perhaps couldn't usually afford to eat out and let's say have perhaps special occasions with their family, and have family gatherings and that sort of stuff, that's going to be positive because, you know, the bill's going to be 50% less.
yeah,
However, you know, just through the few people that I've spoken to with regards to it, they've truly taken advantage to it. And I think it's Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, in fact, at a lot of places, 3 days in a row, they're eating out. And don't get me wrong, ultimately, I guess it depends where you're eating out and ultimately how much you are consuming when you are eating out. But there's always the potential for people to think, well, it's 50% off. And I don't know if it's just how British people, how like people seem to think, but it's a case of, well, 50% off, I'll just buy more.
yeah,
I'll just get more, as opposed to actually I'm just going to go out, have what I'd normally have, enjoy it, have a really great time with friends, family, loved ones. And luckily for us, financially, it's going to be a lot better because we're only paying half what we'd normally pay. But yeah, again, for me, I get it. There are positives to it in terms of people being able to eat out together that perhaps normally wouldn't be able to. But on the flip side, I'm not really sure how that's going to benefit people from a health perspective. And if the government were looking at it that way, if they were, it's sort of, yeah, it's not one that I really understand as to how that's particularly going to help people.
I think it's a few queries for myself. One being that obviously I know they want to like get the hospitality back up and running and stuff like that. Obviously, it was a market that was heavily in like hit with. The other concern is obviously the fact that people are now having to dine in to eat the food, which obviously creates an issue in terms of social distancing, all this sort of stuff. We go back into that sort of loop again in terms of all them concerns, because that could potentially spread the virus if it's still around. And then the third thing in terms of the government, are they doing it in terms of, are they going to hit us in the future with more tax? in terms of, are they going to go in the future? Are they going to go, right, we're going to increase tax because we're going to go for probably recession, which I've discussed previously with a guest, and I think a lot of people know it's coming, or it's happening now. So is it that going to be another factor in terms of why they're doing it?
Possibly. I think it's a real difficult one. I think only they really know why they've implemented it and whether they're actually sharing the reasons as to truly why they are. However, in terms of like a recession, I think it's going to be interesting because I think certain individuals are actually going to be better off because of lockdown. And I think it's going to have enabled certain people to look at the situation they were in, zoom out, almost have a bit of a bird's eye view and reflect on where they are. And during that 3 or 4 months where people were in lockdown, go, right, this is what I'm going to do with my business, assessing all different areas of their life. And I think a lot of people are actually possibly going to be better off. However, on the flip side, there is also going to be certain people and certain businesses that will have taken a massive hit from lockdown and potentially are unable to run any longer simply because of, if you have 3 months of no business coming in, people still have bills to pay, they still have mortgages to pay. And I think obviously we don't really know what's going to happen with the economy, how it's truly going to be affected over the next 6, 12, 18 months. So unfortunately, I think that's just something we're going to have to wait and see how it affects us. But I don't think we'll ever truly know what the government's main intention was with this sort of scheme. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. It's just, we're just unsure what's going to happen. But like I say, it was just an interesting idea. Obviously, was just getting people to eat out more, obviously reducing the bill. But like I say, my general concern was just the fact that I just thought people just see that as like basically like 2 for 1 or something, where they're just going to buy twice as much and not think of actually I'm saving money and using that money for something else. But I don't know.
Yeah, I think it'll probably be twofold. I think you'll get some people that will look at it as this is a financial benefit, and then you'll get some people that look at it and go, this is an opportunity for me to eat or to enjoy twice as much food and drink.
Man versus food, yeah.
Yeah. Effectively, I'm sure we'll see that. To be honest, it's going to be one or the other. It's just going to be dependent on the individual and their particular situation, I think.
That's great. Right, what I'm going to finish on with is my final 2 questions, which I ask all my guests. And one of them is, firstly, what does it mean to be human, Rob Zand?
Oh, Jesus, that's a deep question, Dave. So I think the way I look at it is, obviously, with my role and what I do, I think I just like to, and you sort of mentioned it before we started this podcast in terms of you starting these podcasts, and you said if it helps one person, then that's you're happy with that. You're really satisfied with that. I think I was always going to end up doing something that helps people and helps improves people's lives. So I think if I can leave this, if I can leave this planet, if you like, a better place than when I arrived, if you like, or if I can benefit as many people's lives as possible, whether that's making them feel more confident, healthier, even live for longer, then obviously I'm happy with that, and I've done a good job. But I'd also say as well, I mentioned it earlier, that we do live in a world now where it's just 100 million miles an hour, and I think people just need to relax and actually enjoy like each day and just have a laugh each day, because everyone is extremely stressed. They're worrying so much about the future and what's gone on. And I think sometimes you just need to like slow down a little bit, maybe put your phone away and just enjoy like your day and what you're doing that day with the people, you love spending time with. And for me, it's as simple as that. Like, I'm quite laid back in general, but I think people get way too stressed about trivial things and stressed about things that they can't actually affect. And I think it's just a case of, there's a quote that I was always told, and everything happens for a reason. And I think you just gotta roll with it, to be honest.
That's really positive in terms of, like, I certainly think you're on those steps for that in terms of your helping people, and I certainly think I agree with you. I think people just have to be positive, and just remember, we're not here for a long time. We need to sort of enjoy each day that comes and try not to focus and beat ourselves down. I certainly think,
100%, mate.
yeah.
100%.
And finally, what I wanted to ask you is, what makes you stay humble?
Jesus, I would say, realizing that the position I'm in now, I've really had to work for. Like, and I would say I've got my like parents and my upbringing to thank for this. In that, if you want something, you've got to work hard for it, and it takes a long time to get into certain positions. And I think if you're just handed something on a plate, I don't think you have any appreciation for it. So for me, I realise that I'm lucky to be able to coach and have coached so many people. I realise that I'm lucky just to have the level of like health that I do. I'm lucky to have the life that I have, essentially. And yeah, I think it's just that, just realising that I've had to work really hard to get to where I am, but also, on the flip side, I also realise how lucky I've been as well to have had and have the opportunities that I've got currently.
That's really positive that you talk about your upbringing and how like you appreciate that and where you are now. That's really great to hear that. Where can people contact or reach out to you, Rob, in terms of social media or websites that you have?
So my website is just robzandfitness.co.uk, but the easiest way to reach me is just on Instagram. So it's rob_zand_fitness, and that's where you'll find me most days, sharing a lot of content. All sorts with regards to fitness, nutrition, other random things that seem to take place on my Instagram story as well. So yeah, I'll just say Instagram's the easiest place to reach out to me, to be honest with you, Dave.
That's great. Well, I will be putting them in the show notes anyway, Rob, for people, so it's easier for them to access that. But I just want to appreciate, thank you for taking time out your day to come on this podcast and share your thoughts, because, I really appreciate your thoughts in terms of these current sort of predicaments with public health and stuff like that. And I'm really interested to listen to what you've said and shared with everyone. I really appreciate you for coming on and doing that today for me.
No, you're welcome, Dave. Anytime. Really enjoyed it. Really enjoyed it, mate.
See you soon.
See you soon, mate.